nervous about my surgery. I think I'm going to die. And it was a very simple procedure. It was like they were going to go in, 15 minutes, done. And she's like, I think I'm going to die. And I was like, well, let me show you the video on YouTube. Like, it's a very simple procedure. The doctor came and explained it again. She's like, you guys, I think I'm going to die. And she's like, all right, I'll just do it. She died.
Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Cryptic Conversations. I'm your host, Tunes from the Crypt. We have another very special episode in store for you today. Today's guests are Meg and Maryam. Meg brings 16 years of clinical nursing experience, offering a grounded scientific perspective on baffling health conditions. Maryam, a gifted psychic and spiritual teacher, uses her abilities in mediumship and remote viewing to uncover hidden insights into unexplained illnesses. Together, their nurse-psychic collaboration tackles health mysteries to bring you compelling stories and holistic solutions. And it's a pleasure to have them with us today. So welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for being here. So Meg, can you share a bit about your early life, and what inspired you to pursue a career in nursing?
So my dad was a nurse, and that's kind of what inspired me to become a nurse. I saw him do it, and I was like, that's what I want to do. I want to help people. And I always had that sort of drive to help others, drawn towards healing. And I definitely feel like I found my purpose.
Awesome. I love it. And Maryam, what was your childhood like? When did you first discover your psychic and mediumship abilities?
I don't know a time when I didn't have them. They were just always there, and I didn't realize other people didn't have them, basically. So just navigating that could be challenging, but also it was nice. I had my mother who was very supportive. She helped me understand it better. So I know it was easier for me than maybe a lot of other people.
So what was your early life like? Do you have any interesting stories when you started to uncover some of those abilities?
I would say to my mom stuff like, oh, look there's Uncle so-and-so, and Uncle so-and-so had died. So there was how are you seeing that? When I was in school, I was diagnosed with, some learning disabilities, and I was still able to get all the answers correct, even though I wasn't doing it the way I was supposed to. So teachers were like, how is she getting the right answers? I don't get it. And that's where my mom started to think something is different with my daughter. She's getting these answers correct, but she doesn't know how to do it. And then, as I started to get a little bit older, I would, when my in high school and junior high, if my friends liked somebody, I could tell them, oh, I knew who he likes, or silly stuff that is unimportant. But at the time I was realizing, ooh, I knew stuff other people didn't know. And then as I got even a little bit older, it got more intense, and you would again know things you'd sometimes rather not know. But my mom brought me to other psychics to show me that there's other people like me and how to better manage it. And, so it was a journey.
Awesome. I love that. And I love your guys' concept. It's kind of, that blend of science and spirituality, right? So, I'm curious, how did you both meet, and what guided the decision to pursue this project, as a team and tackling medical mysteries?
Yeah, it's kind of like a fate story. It's so crazy how we met. I started a TikTok during COVID where I would help other nurses, teach skills and things like that. And I made one TikTok just off the top of my head telling a story of something where I had seen a ghost at work or some paranormal activity, which is normal for me. That's followed me my whole life. I've seen things move and float around. And I was just telling, this haunted hospital night shift story, and it kind of blew up. So I made it a series and I told more stories. And then it started to get attention of Travel Channel haunted hospitals, and it kind of grew from there. And then Maryam was part of a project that reached out to me and said, hey, would you come and tell your stories here about your paranormal experiences? And that's how we got connected. And then Maryam had the idea of, I am a medical medium. Let me go and help people. Will you come alongside with me because you trust me and you understand my gift? And I was like, yeah, let's try it. I want to see this. And from the first patient or person that we got connected with, I was like, oh shoot, this is real. We need to be doing this. This is a thing. And then it grew from there.
Oh, wow. So what was that first case or moment, that first experience working together?
Oh man, wasn't it? Which one was our very, very first one? Do you remember?
Yeah, I do. I remember the very first case was it was challenging because it was our first case together, but also he was having some stuff going on in his personal arena. So it was like, oh my gosh, we're tackling like this poor guy's having stuff going on in a very private time in a very private way. And we were able to, I mean, we actually got in there and was really able to help him, but it was crazy how our first case was like, oh my gosh, and it was, I don't remember really, I don't remember where I landed with where it was coming from, the struggle he was having, but yeah, anyway, it was just a strange one. I think when we skipped down a couple clients and we got to the one client who was having just crazy symptoms that were all over the chart, and that none of it was adding up or connecting or making any sense, and I was able to start connecting dots, and that's when Meg was able to really give this person a clear roadmap, like get these tests, ask your doctor about this. And that's when it was like we just started to see a pattern that we were really able to tap into something that doctors couldn't for whatever reason for them.
Wow. Okay. So I'm curious, Meg, like, do you have any statistics or any data, like, or you could give like an estimate, like how many medical illnesses are like unsolved or like mysteries?
Yeah, I think it's hard to say because a lot of people, unless you fit into a very direct box, it's hard to diagnose, and if you have multi-symptoms and multi-systems, like let's say you have stomach issues, but then you're having neurological issues, and then you're having urinary issues, and it's like, well, you're going to go see a specialist for each one of those parts of the body or organs. How does it all fit together? And very rarely will medicine try to fit it all together and treat it holistically. If I were to think of a statistic, it's probably 20% of diagnoses are idiopathic. Like, we don't know what's going on, but we'll try to treat symptoms. And that's why like rheumatoid doctors and autoimmune diseases and diagnoses are now so prevalent, because before we were like, I don't know, but maybe it's this, I'll treat your symptoms.
So I'm curious too, like what are some of those common illnesses, or are there common ones that you're noticing?
Well, not exact diagnoses, but it'll be internal and external symptoms. So maybe eczema, they'll have eczema in places, and we don't really know what it is or what it's coming from. All we do in the medical community to treat it is we give you drugs to depress your immune system so that you don't have these flare-ups or these symptoms. That's the only way that it's treated. So certain things like that. And then internally, a lot of GI symptoms, like similar to Crohn's, where you're just like irritable bowel syndrome. You just have an irritable bowel. Why is it happening? I don't know, but we're going to give you these drugs to depress your immune system and depress your own body's immune response so that you don't have it.
Yeah. That's interesting. Yeah. I feel like what I've noticed and learned is like, there's a interesting connection between the skin and the gut. Have you?
I really truly believe everything is connected. Some people were saying, just recently, I took my kids to the dentist today, and they were like, oral health really leads to other things. And there was a there who was actually had a heart valve issue and then had to take an antibiotic before he had dental work, because when you have dental infections, it can lead to heart infections. We don't exactly know why. We just know it happens.
Wow.
I think everything is connected.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So I'm curious, like, so when you guys work together as a team, like, how do you guys balance, the scientific side with the more spiritual side in solving medical mysteries?
So what happens is Meg will meet with the client first without me there, and she'll get all that information. And Meg, you can speak more to that because obviously I don't know. And then I come in and I actually start, like, I just basically ask them to tell me one or two things that are bothering them. Like, I don't get any information. And then I just start reading the body and saying to Meg, like, I feel like this gland isn't working, or this is, excreting something. And then she puts all those pieces together. So I'm just telling her, like, this is what's not working. This is what is working. This is like, and I don't really know the names or what those pieces are. And then she's the one that puts the whole puzzle together.
The patient first, I'll kind of do like a triage. Like, when did these symptoms start? Let's make a timeline of the origin of how everything started, and then nail down their symptoms. So what have you been experiencing? Has it gotten worse or better? What are you experiencing now? And then kind of be a detective and put the whole story together. And then afterwards, they'll go to Maryam, say, hey, I'm experiencing this symptom and this symptom. And then Maryam takes over, and then I kind of piece it together, because Maryam will, like, let's say, point to certain parts of the body. And then I use my knowledge of anatomy and physiology to say, okay, that's this gland, or that's this organ, or something like that. And if she uses words like leaking, stress, tear, I'm able to say, okay, well, that's what's happening inside of the body. You need to order this specific lab. You need to order this specific test or diagnostic radiology tool or anything like that. And then they'll go and take that information back to their practitioner and say, hey, can I have these done? And then we'll figure it out what it is together.
Awesome. I love that. Yeah. So, I've been on my spiritual journey over the past few years. I've had a strange life as well. I feel like I'm a little bit psychic. I'm uncovering things as I go along. I've had paranormal experiences and different things. We could talk about that in another episode, but I wanted to ask you, so like, as I'm learning more about all this stuff, Maryam, when you're, what are you doing? Like, are you connecting with one's higher self, their spirit guides, or is it more like intuitive? What is that process like?
So to acknowledge you, first off, everybody has psychic skill sets. So you absolutely have them. It's just a matter of bringing them out. So through meditation, through tarot reading, whatever modality you want to use, you can make them bigger and stronger. For me, it just depends on the situation. Like if I'm doing the medical mediumship, I'm like scanning the body almost like an x-ray. If I'm helping someone with personal struggles, sometimes I'm speaking to their guide, sometimes it's my guide, sometimes it's just like a higher awareness of their life as a whole. Sometimes I'm looking at their past life kind of like as if it's a movie. So it's, if I'm dealing with ETs or aliens, then that communication is more telepathic. It's very different.
Wow, I love that. And it's so mind blowing. Like I can see how people are like skeptical to this stuff, right? But it's just so crazy to think about how there's just so much more going on in this reality than we really understand,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Of course. There's so much more than just our bodies, right?
Yeah. Okay. So are there any medical mysteries that you guys are currently exploring?
I mean, we kind of go like patient by patient, when they come to us and we have that session, that's how we kind of go through it. But there were some really interesting things that Maryam had brought up in a patient where she was having certain symptoms and it related to her behavior or her pattern. And as she was saying it, I saw that in myself and I was like, oh, wait, I tend to have those specific patterns in my behavior and my thinking. That's something that I need to heal in myself and I need to work on, because I was having, maybe some of the similar symptoms that she was having. I was like, oh my gosh, what a connection. So that was one that just recently happened. But each patient we go case by case, and we don't have any open cases right now.
We're actually going to be starting a Q&A on Thursday nights, 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, 8 Eastern, where we'll be live on YouTube taking questions from our viewers, whatever they have questions about their health, or maybe whatever they want to know about their health. Let's say that. Is that fair to say, Meg?
That's perfect.
And we'll put our skill sets together to use there. And we may bring on a client who has some questions about their health, and she may share her story and we'll work with her. But that's kind of right now we work privately, where you can pay to come have a session, or if you're willing to come on one of our lives, we wouldn't charge you. And we will then work with you there. So it really just depends on what you can afford and what you need.
Awesome. I love it. So what about, do you guys ever work on like more like well-known celebrity cases or stuff like that in the news?
Not yet. But I love that idea for sure.
Yeah. I just wanted to
just like becoming, how like who was I just watching? Tyler, who kind of connects to the other side and talks to celebrities, dead relatives, or close, friends and family. I can definitely see this turning into something that could benefit everybody, including, a high level people or celebrities.
Yeah, definitely, for sure. You guys are very unique. I don't know if there's any other people out there that are kind of doing what you guys are doing.
Yeah, not that we know of.
Yeah. Okay. So I just kind of wanted to talk to you guys a little bit about the stuff that's going on with Diddy. I'm not sure if you guys are aware, but there was like alleged pneumonia deaths, illnesses, and injuries linked to Diddy. Are you guys aware of that or no? Yeah. Yeah, so I just wanted to read this quick excerpt for you. So it's like rumors online suggest that individuals associated with Diddy, such as his ex-partner Kim Porter, who died in 2018 from lobar pneumonia, were intentionally targeted. Jamie Foxx also allegedly reported Diddy to the FBI for poisoning, with claims that poisoning could cause pneumonia-like symptoms. Also, I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with Diddy and his relationship with the artist Al B. Sure. Pretty much Diddy stole Al B. Sure's wife. That was Kim Porter. Pretty much like stole his wife and then became stepdad to the son that they had together. He raised him as his own, and kind of prevented Al B. Sure from seeing his own son. It's like a lot of stuff's coming out about Diddy, like he's kind of narcissistic, and there's a lot of stuff coming out, right? So curious what you guys thought about all that, if you guys were up to date on it.
Okay, so all I can say is this is when I know everything you're talking about. I haven't followed it, but I've been hearing about it, obviously. I do remember when his wife Kim Porter passed, and all I can say is something didn't sit right with me. And I didn't know, I didn't know who Kim Porter was. I didn't know who he was married to at the time. I know who he is. Because of my age, I know who Al B. Sure is. Meg's like, who's Al B. Sure? I know who he is. And I didn't know all the moving parts. I say that just because you bring this up. When her death was first announced, I was like, something's not right here. It didn't feel right. None of it did.
Yeah, absolutely. My podcast, I don't like to gossip, right? Like my thing is about helping the people and talk about spirituality and stuff. So I was really kind of hesitant about talking about this stuff, but it's in the news, and I don't know, like you said too, like something just doesn't sit right with me with everything that he's done, and it's like, and just, you guys heard about like him getting out, like getting dismissed on some of these charges, which is like ridiculous.
Yeah.
I definitely agree. When you're talking about pneumonia, it's just like from a medical standpoint, there's really like three major things that causes pneumonia. And it's usually bacterial, viral, and then the third one can be like a chemical, or, pneumonia is just inflammation of the bottom of the lung, the little alveoli sacs. So typically the inflammation is a bacteria or a virus, and then you treat antibacterial or antivirals, and then it goes away. But if it's something chemical, it's something a little bit harder to detect, especially if it's something that you inhale or you get exposed to and filter out pretty quickly. So I think it's very uncommon for people to die of pneumonia unless you're really immunocompromised. It's really
interesting.
Just you treat. But if there was some sort of substance or chemical that people were exposed to through inhalation, that could be like the only explanation. But that's very suspicious that so many people around a certain person would die of pneumonia. It's very easily treatable.
Yeah. Yeah. What about Maryam? From a spiritual or psychic viewpoint, could there be an energetic or karmic influence surrounding Diddy that could manifest, as physical illness in those around him?
I would say that could be possible in general, but that's not what's happening here.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
Are you following?
Yeah. Even like the whole, like, you guys know about Justin Bieber? Like, I feel bad for that poor kid. It's like it's starting to come out, that stuff that's happened to him and stuff, but I don't think he's like publicly talked about it yet, but you could tell.
Yeah, you can tell he's struggling with some emotional and mental stuff, which is hard to watch. It's hard to see someone struggle. Let's put it that way. And I think his struggle is generally coming from an internal place, because he's really a good person trying to make sense of his own pain and suffering.
Yeah. Being a child star, a teenage star, and, navigating the whole Hollywood industry and all that. Like, are you guys familiar with his music video, Yummy? The hidden meaning behind it. Yeah. Like check that music video out. It was one of his last music videos. And it's like, it kind of, if you look at like the subliminal like message behind it, you could see that it's the message he was trying to put out in that video was just how these child stars are being treated in Hollywood. So really check it out. Like, can you describe any other recent projects or cases, where your combined expertise led to a breakthrough or new understanding of a health issue?
We had the one case where this woman came to us with migraines, and they had done all the testing that you would typically do for migraines, and no one could help her with them. I mean, they were debilitating. She couldn't get out of bed. She wouldn't travel because if she got a migraine, she wouldn't be able to get help or it was really affecting her life to such a degree. And we were able to put together that it was coming from the gut. Was it the gut or the sugars and the, it's like you probably remember more than me.
Where the liver and pancreas meet. Yeah.
So that was a surprising find because you wouldn't necessarily associate a migraine to gut.
Okay. So what about Meg? Like what's the most surprising insight that you've gained from working alongside Maryam's spiritual perspective?
I think really realizing how much the body keeps score and how she would be able to say, you had this specific incident happen when you were a child. You had this specific incident happen when you were younger. You need to heal this wound. And the person would be like, wow, I never told anyone that, or wow, that's true. And seeing that and how trauma can then turn into illness that you can't ignore later was something that I kind of understood, but I understood it so much more now, and seeing it happen in people, and they are like focused on, okay, I'm going to heal this part of my body, as well as looking at these other symptoms or whatever it is. But sometimes they didn't need medical treatment, or they didn't need some new medication or a surgery. They needed to heal a specific part of their past and in their own soul. And that's what was going to fix the symptoms. So that was kind of the most surprising thing to me. Sometimes you don't need another medication or another procedure. You need to heal that part of you.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, I love that. Yeah, I'm curious. So Meg, it sounds like you're kind of have you always been open to spirituality? It sounds like you're kind of open, right? So obviously there's a lot of people that are just strictly like, no, science is the only way and that's it. And then there's other people who are just very spiritual. What about you? You seems like you've been kind of more open, or were you a skeptic before working together?
I think the longer that you work in healthcare, or the longer you work night shift, you're going to become a little bit superstitious, or a little bit just like open to, well, that had no explanation. Mm-hmm. Or, like I had a patient who was like, I'm nervous about my surgery. I think I'm going to die. And it was a very simple procedure. It was like, they were going to go in 15 minutes, done. And she's like, I think I'm going to die. And I was like, well, let me show you the video on YouTube. Like, it's a very simple procedure. The doctor came and explained it again. She's like, you guys, I think I'm going to die. And she's like, all right, I'll just do it. She died. It was like she knew what was going to happen. And me and another nurse were there at the nurse's station, and we hear code blue, procedure room 4, because it was on a different floor. And her entire bed, where she was, her old room, moved. It was locked. It had brakes on the wheels. The whole hospital bed moved, and the EKG leads started swinging from the monitor. And I'm getting goosebumps when I talk about it. But the other nurse and me were like, that's her telling us.
Oh my gosh.
So little things like that you just experience over and
over. That's not
like,
little.
Well, I can't deny that. Like, that's so real.
Yeah. And that's not little.
Yeah, that one was one that I still think about. And sometimes I talk to her and I'm like,
do?
Yeah. I feel like, I mean, I didn't directly force her to go, it's the doctors being like, this is simple. This is easy. Sign the papers.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know what I could have done, but I feel like, man, yeah, I think when it's the end.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Do you ever work in the emergency room? You always hear about, hospital stories, especially in the emergency room stuff. Do you ever work in the emergency room?
Yeah, that's where I started.
Oh, okay. Do you have any other spooky stories? I like to talk about spooky stories on here.
In the ER. Yeah, I had a room. This is when I worked in Miami. There was a room room 16, that was like constantly things would fall off the walls, and people that were staying overnight in there would be like, there's a lady in in Spanish, like wearing one of those little muumuu like outfits, and she's in my room. Can you get her out? And there's nobody in there. But we heard that complaint over and over in that. And I remember one time the alarm kept going off and no one was in there. Like, when you have press a call bell, a patient is calling the nurse, and it kept going off, and we would unplug it and it would still go off, plug it in, it would still go off. And I remember this Jamaican nurse, she was like my nurse mom, and she walked in there and she started yelling at whatever was in there. She was like, we don't have time for you to be, we are busy. There's another patient coming in here. Stop it. And then she slams the door. And we didn't have any other things go on for the rest of the shift, at least for my shift. And so she told the ghost, put the ghost in it.
That's awesome. I love it. It's a way to do it.
That's funny. I'm just imagining, like a nurse with her Jamaican accent, she's like,
so, stop it.
So what about Maryam? How would you make sense and describe all of those stories that she's talking about? Like what's going on there?
So obviously, she is dealing with beings that have just left body. And for some of them, when the spirit leaves the body abruptly, unexpectedly, or tragically, that's when we typically see spirits hanging around. A lot of times, sometimes the spirits are just trying to realize what's happening. Like they're not meaning to move stuff and haunt. They're just trying to figure out what just happened to me. And Meg might say, well, no one recently died in that room, so how come someone's in that room still? Well, because they don't have a concept of time like we do, right? So for them, if a spirit, maybe let's say it left the body a year ago, but it was so abrupt and so maybe jarring, tragic, it's still trying to make sense of what happened. And a lot of times you have beings that know exactly what they're doing and they're pissed and they want people to know they're pissed, but I feel like at the end of the day, every scenario is different. And really you want to look at who witnessed it and what were they feeling when they witnessed it, because that's who's going to be the judge ultimately on what happened. Because Meg, whatever you're feeling in that instinct in that moment is typically correct. And what Meg was experiencing and feeling and sensing is going to be more accurate than what anyone else has to say, because that experience was for them. It was for her. It wasn't for, like, sometimes when I come in as a medium, I feel like this isn't for me to do. Like, this was your life lesson. This was your experience. You tell me what you think. You tell me what you felt. This was for you, not for me, especially when it comes to ET encounters, or a home that you live in that's haunted, or, it's like you are having this experience to learn something. So you tell me what you think is going on. And basically, I'm just going to validate you. And a lot of times, if they start to veer off because they get emotional, then I can say, okay, well, what you said in the beginning is true. That was your intuition. And now there's just an emotional component. So we'll kind of push that to the side, but stay focused on what your intuition told you about why this happened and what this spirit wants and why they're there. So.
Wow. Yeah, I love that. So you've mentioned about ETs a couple of times, can you talk to us a little bit about that?
So much going on with ETs right nowadays. Alien communication. I have a show on YouTube called Ask the Aliens, where I channel a different group once or twice a month, and the audience gets to ask questions like what have they been wanting to ask an ET or an alien. We'll talk to people who have been abducted. People ask questions about their own experiences that weren't necessarily scary or painful, but they're curious, why did this ET show up? And a lot of times in the paranormal work that I do, a lot of times people just assume that paranormal activity is a ghost or, a spirit of some sort. And it's not. I've encountered many times that they're actually ETs that are moving through that space. So I really love that work too.
Awesome. I love that. Yeah. Like I said, I can see how people are skeptical to all this stuff. And me, partly, I'm still kind of like skeptical. I've never seen an alien, right? I've never seen a UFO, but I would like to tell you why I believe, so my uncle, my dad, I wasn't very close to him, but my dad told me growing up that he was like very into sci-fi and this and that. And my dad would always write him off like, oh, he started taking LSD and he just got weird or whatever. Right. But anyways, as I got older, I think this was about 4 years ago, I always knew that my dad told me, I always knew that he wrote a book. He wrote a book about his experiences growing up and all that, right? And so about 3 years ago, I decided to read his book. It's called A Message by Alfonso Martinez. And I finally decided to read it. And it was interesting, right? Like, how can I prove, whether the stuff that he was writing in this book is true or not? How can I prove that? I don't know. But it was just, I was open to that idea, right? Anyways, at the back of the book, he was talking about how he was seeing this hypnotherapist, and he put her contact information in the book. And so I was actually going through a dark period in my life, and so I wanted to try hypnotherapy. So I reached out to her, and I was like, oh, let me try a session. And so I met up with her, and she was straight up telling me, she was like, look, I'm gonna tell you straight up, like, a lot of her cases are people who have had abduction experiences. And she said, like, she always grew up, like, as a Catholic girl, went to Catholic school, this and that. She never really believed in this stuff, right? But when she started to do her hypnotherapy career, next thing she knew, she started getting all these referrals, like, hey, this one and this one, all these abduction experiences. And that's when she started to realize, like, wait a minute, like, there's something going on here, you know? And so I was like, I'm like, you know, that makes sense to me, like from her point of view. And another little tidbit is I remember in community college, I was taking in a astronomy class, and the first day of class, the teacher was like, all right, guys, literally the first day of class, she's like, all right, guys, can I get a show of hands? How many of you guys believe there's other life forms out in the universe? And, you know, it's the first day of class, we're in college, and all of us are like looking around, we're afraid to raise our hand or whatever. And then you just see like a couple of people do it, and then we all started raising our hand, you know? And the professor was straight up like, she was like, yeah, like, I believe it, you know, like the universe is so vast. How can we believe that we're the only ones, you know, the only life form out there, you know? So that's what I just wanted to share that, you know, if you have any thoughts on that.
I think it's incredible. I love hearing stories about hypnotherapists hopefully helping these people, because I always wonder, like, where do these poor people go when they're having these experiences? I mean, they can seek me out, but you have to, and I feel bad for people who go through constant abductions, because it's scary and it's violating and it's all but it also isn't a fair visual of all ET life. Just like it's no different than humans, right? You have good humans, you have bad humans, you have jerks, you have nice ones, right? Same thing. And so it's these lower vibration ETs that give everyone else a bad name.
Yeah, I was actually about to ask you about that. Like, so what do you see it? Is it more benevolent or malevolent? You know, but so it's the whole spectrum, right? There's good and there's bad, you know?
Yeah, any enlightened ET, just like any enlightened human, is not going to be invasive, violating, taking someone against their will. That just doesn't happen. And the higher vibration ETs won't be coming down to planet Earth, because planet Earth is toxic. It is a toxic, dark space that needs to raise its vibration. They will help us raise our vibration, but they won't be coming down and dealing directly in that capacity. The darker vibration beings do that. They abduct and they intervene and they try to get in and make things a little bit worse. They are not the cause of our suffering, but they sure don't help. So there's definitely levels.
So what are the different races? You know, like in the past few years, you start hearing about, you know, Greys, and you start hearing about, you know, Arcturians and Pleiadians and all. Is that what you see it as? Is it, you know, that kind of, you know, what are the different kinds or whatever?
So when I channel these beings, I do not ask or seek a specific name unless they tell me. A lot of times I get a location more than I get a name. And the reason for that is it's all open to how I interpret what I'm hearing. And a name doesn't matter. It's a feeling. I can recognize these beings because I can recognize the sensation, the feeling. I don't have to have a name. And I also don't like putting that out there to people, because then people grab onto the Pleiadians and they're just like, oh, you say aliens, you hear Pleiadians. And it's like, there are so many other beings out there that aren't just, and nothing wrong with Pleiadians, love them. I'm just saying we just kind of latch on to the word that's easiest to say, or the word that we hear the most. And it's like I channeled this family, I call them family, an alien family, last Thursday on my show, and they're amphibian-like, and they're still very similar to like a frog, and they were so cute, and we're saying all these sweet things, and they're just this adorable little silly alien family that nobody will ever know about unless they watch that, because I don't have a name and I don't have a location. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, if you're not giving hard facts, people just kind of go, And I'm like, wouldn't you like, there's so much to learn about, and these beings have such beautiful, sweet, cute energy. It's like, it's so amazing to interact with them if you just give yourself that chance. And that's the thing about the viewers, when they're watching, they can allow themselves to hear them and feel that at the same time too. So there's just so many different groups. And the Greys, I just talked to the Greys. I know it sounds silly. My husband thinks I'm insane. I just talked to the Greys 2 weeks ago, and the Greys have now a second level of, they're working on raising their vibration. And so there's a group of Greys that are still in a darker, lower vibration, but there's a group of Greys that have elevated considerably and are really beautiful species. So there's so much to talk about. We don't have enough time.
Yeah, it's so mind-blowing to me. Just like the thought of that being real, you know, it's like I said, I'm open to it, you know. It's just so mind-blowing to even fathom that, you know. So okay, pivoting back to, you know, like the health, the medical mysteries, you know, have you guys noticed, like, are there any specific health conditions like chronic fatigue or rare diseases where you found spiritual insights particularly complement medical approaches?
Ooh, this is an interesting question. I do want to highlight, if I'm seeing things that are in common and I'm seeing a pattern, it's a lot of women. There's a lot of women with thyroid stuff. There's a lot of women who, through maybe feelings of helplessness, have then had very similar symptoms that come from the inside out that Miriam has touched on. And I definitely see that in our particular society and generation. I can definitely see that, and complemented with, let's say, something like eczema, or something where people are having very specific skin blotches where it's outer, and then they take, let's say, a steroid or something that's going to take away the inflammation that's happening, that they're creating themselves in their body, then it takes it away. So the core is inflammation. There's something causing that inflammation. They're silenced, whereas your voice, it's in the neck. Then you're having thyroid issues. So finding that origin and then proving it by, oh, look, that medicine will fix just the symptom. It won't make it go away. It'll make you a little more comfortable. But finding that origin, that's how it kind of complements each other.
Wow, that's interesting. Yeah, like I've heard a couple of instances where like different girls, going on. I think I've watched a couple of YouTube channels where these girls talk about their spiritual journey and their spiritual path, and they kind of were saying that they've had like energetic issues in the throat, like, and like it stemmed from them not like speaking their truth, or not standing up for themselves, just kind of not speaking their truth. Is that kind of what's going on sometimes?
I think so. I think that Meg and I have talked about this before, that yes, there is the obvious, right? And that's going to be common and very real. But also, we can have other restrictive past emotions that live there that may not have to do with the voice, right? And that's why it's really important that we dig deep. We go to therapy. We see natural paths. We still see medical doctors, because the trauma that we've gone through can come out in so many different ways. And sometimes someone may be suffering in the throat, but it actually stemmed from somewhere else. And so just finding those building blocks is why we think it's so important to have both medical and spiritual there, because you have to have both.
Yeah, I love that. I'm curious too, like, have you guys watched any of these like near-death experience or videos? Or I'm curious if you've experienced any near-death experiences in the hospital where like they say they died and they came back and stuff like that.
Yes. Yeah, that was seeing somebody that we coded, and flatlined for a long time. We coded this gentleman for over an hour, and I was like, they're going to call it. They're going to call it. And then we kept coding him, and I was like, they're going to call it. They're going to call it. And we kept going. And then he ended up coming back, and he said that he had a near-death experience. And the way that he came back, like the expression on his face, because when you're unconscious or whatever, it's very blank. And when you're getting coded and you're, get the heartbeat back, it's a very painful, traumatic, violent thing to bring somebody back from the dead. When he came back, he had the most peaceful, like, just beautiful, like, no pain. We were just pounding on his chest for an hour. Like, ribs are broken for sure. He like came back when he opened his eyes with such a peace. And from that moment and some other experiences, I was like, I'm not afraid to die.
Wow.
I'm not afraid of death anymore, because of just seeing how he came back. I was like, oh, I was just in the best place ever. I was in such a different realm. And then I read another book, Dying to Be Me by Anita Morjani, talked about how she had really end-stage cancer, was on her deathbed, had a near-death experience, and her father from the other side said, it's not time for you, go back. And she took all those higher vibrational feelings, her cancer healed without treatment. She walked out of the hospital.
Wow.
There's no cancers. She was like riddled with lymphatic tumors. And yeah, I think there's something really special about people that have those experiences, that get to go there, whatever there is, and come back. They're very different, interesting people.
Yeah, that's awesome. There's so many stories like that, and they always say the similar things like, oh, I was with the light, I went back to the light, and I was back to the source energy, it was infinite love, and they went back to that love, and it's so fascinating to hear these stories. And that's cool that you actually had a firsthand experience of witnessing it. That's cool. Yeah. So I'm curious, like on that note, like we were talking about skeptical people and stuff, right? So how do you guys respond to skeptics who question the validity of combining, of your guys' work together?
I don't know. It doesn't bother me. I think like there's things that we just don't understand that, we're intimidated by. And I think that's just where it stems from. I don't know enough about that to trust it or go in that direction. And then that's fine. You're not there in your journey yet.
I think it's, my whole life has been about dealing with skeptics. So, I got to a certain age and I was like, I'm not here to prove myself to anyone. I think when Nurse Meg and I first started working together, I was very concerned about her and her having to hear people doubt her or her choices, get sucked into my world. But she's so confident, thank God, that she's like, shut up, it's fine. And I was like, okay. She literally could care less. So, yeah, I mean, I still have family members that don't believe in what I do. So, it's just, you get to a certain age where it's just kind of silly and you're like, whatever.
Yeah.
You genuinely just blow it off.
Yeah, that's so true. I actually just left my job and it was like, yeah, for like the longest time, I just felt like I'm playing like a double life, because it's like, I don't want them to know what I'm talking about, all this stuff on my YouTube channel, trying to be professional and all that. But I'm at the point now where I don't care. People want to judge, they can judge. I'm literally, my goal for this channel is just to open minds and help people learn about spirituality. And so, if they don't see the good in that, then it's like, whatever. People are going to hate, people are going to be skeptical. It's like, yeah, so yeah, like I said, for the longest time, feeling like I'm living a double life, but now I left my job, so I'm just really going forward with this. I'm just
Good for you.
gonna be who I am. You know what I mean? Like I think there's good that comes out of that. So
Absolutely. Good for and you must feel lighter now that you don't have to wear that facade anymore,
yeah,
right?
oh yeah. So
That's neat.
yeah. So I'd like to ask you, so like, what role do you guys think that intuition or spiritual practices could play in the future of healthcare?
Hmm. Wait, repeat the question.
What role do you think intuition or spirituality could play in the future of healthcare? Like, do you think in the future spirituality will be more involved with healthcare, or is it always going to still be separate?
It would be ideal if we can meld them because there's things that I don't think you can go without either one in some cases, like you need both. And I've found a lot of healing in um, a lot of hypnotherapy, acupuncture, Reiki healing. I've also found a lot of healing in, I had a medical issue and I needed a surgery or I needed, so there's a place for both if we can meld them together. I think that we can maybe not need as much invasive medical treatment. And I think melding them together is also more preventative.
Yeah, I was going to say that preventative is key, right? And so much of, if you want to call it spiritual healing, should be happening on a daily, regular basis. So if you're constantly, if you have a daily meditation practice, that's non-negotiable. If you're constantly aware of what you're eating, if you're exercising, if you are in therapy when you need it, if you're doing yoga, when you do all those things, you're releasing not only the past, but you're releasing the day. And so the better you get at just continually learning how to release and then also just fill yourself up, fill your cup, you're going to be healthier and stronger, which allows you to fight dis-ease better. And it also allows you just to become aware when the body is in disease because we can only do so much, right? We have air pollution, we have viruses that we're not going to be perfect about it, but we can at least be more in tune with it. And I come from a different world where I purposely never immersed myself with other people that are psychics or practice spirituality, quote unquote, I say, because they tend to be extremists, right? And I'm not about extremists. I feel like that even more so now, working with Nurse Meg, it's like the medical community is imperative and we cannot push them aside or act like science isn't important. And we have to be able to, just like Meg said, blend the two of us, but that means both sides have to be willing to hear the other side. And here's the truth is each individual is in charge of their own body. So if each individual chooses to start their day from a more grounded spiritual, whatever that means for them, prayer, meditation, whatever, if they each start from that place, then it's going to be a lot easier to navigate your health concerns, because you'll be navigating via your intuition, which means you'll be brought to certain people or certain doctors that are very open to this. I've been lucky. I seek out doctors who hear me, who refer me to acupuncturists or understand what I'm going through. Those doctors exist, and we just have to make an effort to find them.
Awesome. I love that. Yeah, like on that note, I just think it's like, I think people are starting to really understand it though. Like, like that we are a soul, we are a spirit inside of a body having a human experience, right? So it's like, what are they always talking about? It's the mind, body, and spirit, right? So it seems like science is more focused on the mind and the body, but let's also pay attention to the spirit, the soul as well, the spiritual side. And like I said, bringing those two together, I think we can really drive things forward in this world. So I hope we see it here in the future.
I agree.
Yeah. So, okay, as we kind of wrap it up here, like what's your guys' the vision of the future of your work?
Oh my gosh, reach more people. Just reach more people, get the word out that this is a possibility, and help as many people as we can.
And for me, it would be to bring more of the medical community along with us, because the more that medicine can confirm and support people that do my work or can support my work, the more healing that will take place inevitably.
Awesome. I love that. So as I like to ask all my guests, as we close out the show, can one of you, just send the listeners out there just a final message of love and healing for those who might be struggling out there?
If there's something that is disrupting your body and disrupting your life, don't stop looking for answers. You're not stuck there. Please email me. I would love to help you, but keep seeking answers.
Some time alone and really go inward, whether it's prayer, meditation, or yoga, so you can become more comfortable with you and you become safe with you, and you're willing to hear yourself in your body say, why am I choosing this suffering right now? And why do I feel I don't deserve to heal? Because those are big questions to ask yourself. And all that means is it opens the door to the right doctors and healers to come in to help you, so you don't do it by yourself.
Awesome. I love that. So thank you guys for meeting with me today and for providing such great wisdom and insights on this episode. I also want to thank the listeners for sticking around to the end. So can you guys, please tell everyone where to find your information, and I'll also add it to the description of the video.
Thank you. You can email me at support@nursemegrn.com. All of my social media platforms are at nursemegrn, and then I have my website, nursemegrn.com.
All of my socials are at Maryam Faresh, and medical mysteries, send them to Meg, and DM me if you want to set up an appointment.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Bye.
Thank you.